Hello and welcome back. I'm Dean Berman from Berman Buyers. Today I wanted to talk about homelessness, and I was going through some figures recently, which was released by it's a combination of the federal, state, territories. Basically outlays the annual spending on social services and homelessness, which amounted to about $5.9 billion. And it got me thinking, in a hypothetical scenario, what happens if that $5.9 billion was totally reallocated from what it's being used currently to purely building houses? And how many could be built, and could it help the homelessness issue that we face in Australia? So very simply, $5.9 billion. As of the 2016 census, there was around a bit over 116,000 people in Australia that was classified as homeless. So if we were to do the numbers on those two figures, it would amount to about $50,000 per person. So you have roughly $50,000 in a hypothetical scenario to construct a dwelling to help home or house that person in need. So I was like, wait, surely this can be done, So I looked at the figures, and I wanted to understand where was this homelessness, where was the greatest density of homelessness around in the country. And I looked at the top 20 LGAs, going from 1 to 20, and Brisbane landed up being number 1 on the list. So as of that census, there was approximately, let's call it just over 5,800 people that were homeless, classified as homeless in the region, which amounts to just under 5% of the figures in the country. So let's take 5% or just under 5% of 5.9 billion, which would leave us $294 million. So $294 million to hypothetically house just under 6,000 people in Brisbane. How would we do this? So this is, I think this would be an interesting example to look at as a way to roll out around the country. If in a hypothetical scenario, we could do this. So, you have this money, $294 million. You have just under 6,000 people who need a house. In Brisbane, it's probably very unlikely that you could just build houses, single-story houses, double-story houses. There's just probably not enough space, there's just land scarcity. So I think the only way to achieve this in such a capital city would be to go up. Therefore, you have to build high-rises. And I guess to keep things simple, 6,000 residents, how do we do that? Okay, 6 blocks, 1,000 residents per block. Would that solve the issue? Maybe. It also creates a number of other flow-on effects, such as housing so many people in such a concentrated environment. And I think that gets to this sort of social, emotional impact on how that can affect, society. But in a nutshell, to me, it seems like a viable potential solution, and something that can be replicated around the country. And when you have areas that are maybe more remote and there's a lot more land, then obviously not building up, maybe building, wide, building, along the ground, single-story houses, for example, maybe 5 bedrooms, kitchenette, bathroom, etc., in each room, and doing it that way. But I think that's an interesting scenario. And I was looking at the numbers as well to see how viable this is. So would we actually be able to do these sort of projects inside budget? So if we take, say, $3,000 a square meter to build this type of property, let's say each unit is roughly 60 square meters, and let's say there's 6,000 of them, this sort of equates to almost 1.1 billion, or just under 1.1 billion. So it wouldn't work based on our budget that we have of 294 million. So that would definitely need to be amended and fixed up. Things like the size of the apartment would have a massive impact on the construction costs. The cost per square meter. So is there a more affordable way to do this? Etc. We haven't even taken the land purchase price into consideration. There's a lot of variables that, would need to be taken into consideration, certainly in a scenario like this. But I guess just to look at the pure raw figures, there's obviously a lot of drawbacks from what I'm talking about. But at the same time, I think it's important to just look at the facts and see, is there any way that this can be done? And I think there might be some sort of potential in, from what I've looked at. But yeah, going back to that sort of social, emotional impact, having these big blocks, how does that affect society? And I think, have a lot of people that have gone through a lot of, maybe trauma or some sort of issues or something in their lives. I think, it would make complete sense to have, some sort of trauma or counseling clinic, as part of, these blocks, for example, having some sort of re-education facilities as part of these blocks where people can get reskilled and retaught new skills to potentially get jobs in the future, to sort of come back into society per se. It might not be that straightforward, obviously, but I think it's just interesting if instead of just building some big buildings, it seems like it needs this sort of emotional social side to it to make it work. And also things like regreening or replanting the surrounds, instead of just having this concrete jungle, making it like a desirable space to be around, lots of greenery, trees, plants, shrubs, flowers, etc. Maybe even vegetable gardens, all this sort of stuff I think would be very interesting. But I also think that for society as a flow-on effect, for all sects of government, I think this would have like a massive like positive flow-on effect long term. Obviously, the outlay would be large and might have to be a multi-tiered stage project over many years, where maybe you're doing certain parts of this capital city in this year and this capital city next year and this region now and this region then. I'm not sure exactly, but I think it would have to be a tiered project because obviously the outlay would be quite expansive. However, if done and well thought and within budget and so on, then it seems like there's something there. But also, I think another important point of this is the social services sector and how they would sort of incorporate into this, because I think they would be the ones sort of running or driving this whole process on the forefront of this. So, at the moment, I'm sure a lot of them are in a situation where they probably run off their feet. They have people, who want a place to stay, but there's just not enough places to stay. So they have to send them away, constantly send them away. Whereas now, if there was enough places for people to actually stay, it fixes a very basic problem. Then instead of them worrying about, sending people away and so on, they can focus on, other aspects of the job, which probably, would help the people that are staying there in a much more productive manner. So I think looking at it, for me, it's not just about building, a few big buildings, for example, in this scenario that we talked about, this hypothetical scenario that we talked about. For me, it's about actually creating a community and finding a way to change the residents' lives.